All right, thank you for joining us. I'm Travis Markham. I'm Director of Education for Austin Classical Guitar. This is Phil Swasey, on staff here with ACG, as well as the director of the Bedichek Middle School Guitar Program, as well as mariachi, right?
Yeah,
Any other things that you're teaching right now?
that's it. Just 4 classical guitar classes, 2 mariachi classes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And yeah, so we're here today kind of to do a retrospective of this first 6 weeks of the school year, look back at some of the things that are going on in the programs around Austin that we've been seeing, and Phil's program himself, and then talk about those first moments with the students, both returning students, those that are new to your program, how to establish a culture, how we're choosing repertoire, how we're assessing students when they come in the room. There's all kinds of things that are happening, and certainly I can speak for the schools around here. The programs are bustling. The kids are making tremendous amount of progress, and some of the programs are moving a little slower for various reasons that I think it's worth noting what those are. But I think a good place to start would be, Phil, for us to talk just about these first 6 weeks for you. What's going on with your program? How many students? And what did those kind of first interactions look like for you at Bedichek?
Yeah, so I've been in the classroom. This is my 9th year, and the first 6 weeks always just seems kind of like a tornado to me. It never really settles until the end of the first week. It's learning names of students. It's trying to figure out personalities very early on so you can understand the dynamics of your classroom, because it's such a ever-changing thing. Every year is different, and I think teachers that come into the classroom expecting it to be the same every year probably run into surprises.
Well, it's interesting because so many teachers are highly organized and very much planners, and we're going into August having months and months of curriculum kind of set, maybe knowing what pieces you're intending to play, and so often we go into the classroom that first week and it's all pointless, or at least a lot of
Right.
that prep work. But it seems like a priority for you. The first thing you said is understanding the individuals, learning who they are, these new people in your classroom, and maybe the students that you knew are coming to you in a different way from 6th to 7th grade or 7th to 8th grade, and building that relationship, learning their names. How do you start to establish that relationship or get to know your students?
I think the details of it. So with my beginning guitar students, the 6th graders, the first day of class, they walk in and I have a roll of toilet paper. I don't know, this is just my thing. Mm-hmm. And I hand each one of them like a different size of toilet paper. And this is my only interaction. This is my first interaction with them. And it does a couple things. It gets them curious about what's happening. And it just kind of breaks down certain barriers of expectations, or, it's just a really weird, quirky thing to do. Mm-hmm. And then they walk in and they're like, what is going on? And then our first activity is just writing our goals down on the toilet paper. That's it, our goals for the year. So it's just a way to kind of set the tone, let them know, I approach things a little bit differently.
Are these your goals, or are you asking them to generate goals?
Yeah, they're goal setting, okay, from the first day. And to be more specific with their goal settings, middle school students will come in and I'll ask them what their goals are for the year, and their first response will be, I want to be a great guitar player, mm-hmm. But to visualize the specifics of that and put it into writing, and is it a song that they want to learn? Is it a style that they want to learn? Is it somebody that they saw that played the guitar that kind of inspired them to do it? And my students, like my former students, the ones that are in high school and graduated, they remember the toilet paper first day of school thing. And we usually revisit it later on in the school year, or maybe at the end of the school year. But those are my first moments with my beginners. And I feel confident that gives them a good first impression of me and kind of my approach to things.
Well, it also, really there's an immediate statement that you're making that you care about what they want in this environment. So many of our students walk into that room with somewhat like an implicit kind of passion for the instrument, and they don't know why they love it, or they just know they want to touch it, they want to play it, they want to be good at it, and you're asking them to communicate their point of view and their perspective about the things that they want, which makes them think, hey, you know, at any point in this class, I might have a say in the direction of my education, which changes their outlook on the future tremendously.
Yeah, and just, I mean, to go from there, you know, the first moments, absolutely with the beginners, they're playing guitar on the first day. I know their names by the end of the first class. And they're already critiquing the music made by their other classmates on the first day of class. So it's their voices are heard immediately. Their stake in the class is heard immediately.
Let's talk about that, because there's a couple of surprising things in that statement. One, not for those of you using guitar curriculum, because we do talk about beautiful and expressive music making from day one, and if you've been to our trainings, you've gone through this yourself, where we play something simply and beautiful day one. But a lot of teachers out there would be surprised that you're, one, able to get everybody set up and playing in those first moments, and then that there's even a vocabulary and a discourse to be had about the quality of the music making. Can you kind of describe that moment?
Yeah, I mean, you have to define the terms that they're critiquing each other on. So time needs to be spent on, you know, what is a good tone, what is a bad tone, what is a loud sound, what is a soft sound. And I think once you give them the vocabulary and start with very simple ideas, then it's really easy for them to be engaged. And what happens is, once they critique another student, they're going to be very aware of that correction that they offer to another student for their own playing. And oftentimes it's something that they probably needed to work on also, or an idea that they needed to work on also, that because they were able to vocalize it probably helps them internalize it also. So, you know, setting up good sound on the classical guitar is detailed technically. You know, it's the correct strokes, moving from the correct point in the hand. But that doesn't mean that it needs to be a boring process. So
Right, and in many ways it's easier than any other instrument that's taught in
Right.
a school, right? So there are, you know, I know when I set up a class on the first day, I try and stick to 4 or 5 broad directives about their specific directives about the right hand stroke and sound. And we might get more detailed as time goes on, but if I can get them setting the right hand up with a straight wrist, with say we're playing eye strokes with a thumb anchored and a diagonal stroke and a good sound, then we can start to talk about the stuff that matters and the stuff that they want to be talking about, which is the music. So the quality of the sound, the volume, how it interacts with the people around them. Have you ever, well, when you're asking these students to play and critique in these earliest of moments, is there a possibility for an unhealthy interaction in those moments, or does everybody kind of buy in and really understand to critique in a positive way or a non-personal way?
yeah, I think it can head in that direction. But you know, with anything, you know, I give them a format. So you always lead with something that the student that you're listening to is doing well. Even if it's just, okay, your left foot's on the footstool, you're holding the instrument correctly. You know, the student compliments the other student first.
Right.
This is the format that we use. And then they go into maybe something a little bit more critical, and then they always end with something positive also. And the accountability is that student will be critiqued at some point also. So he or she wants to be kind to the other person also, so
Right.
that's returned to them. So I think, you know, it's part of classroom culture also in establishing that, and as a teacher modeling it when you're giving feedback to students also, because they're ultimately going to model what you are doing to correct their musicianship. So as a teacher, if you're really harsh on your students and you give directives, your students, when critiquing each other, are going to probably be more likely to do that instead of to kind of round out their criticism and round out their critique of another student. So, yeah, I haven't had any issues with it, honestly, in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Since formatting it that way. But, yeah, and the other thing I love to do, first 6 weeks, the music's simple. Maybe it's minor waltz. I don't know if it's in the curriculum anymore, but I got used to doing a piece called Night Ride, which is similar to one of Hensley's first open string pieces.
That was a piece that there was a year there where we toyed with the idea of single line beginning pieces with recorded accompaniment. So there's a teacher part. And they work really well for guitarist teachers who can do that accompaniment part. But they didn't fit within like the trio search and all of that, so they've been taken out since then. But I know the piece, and I'm happy that it's useful.
Yeah, and so you take a piece like that, Minor Waltz or Night Ride, and once the students have a feel for what the music generally sounds like, maybe it's just 4 measures in Minor Waltz, maybe it's just that first crescendo and decrescendo. We'll spend 30 minutes just exploring their own story ideas for the title of the music and the way they think the music sounds. So, automatically they're thinking kind of about deeper expression, concept of expression, instead of just being worried about the movement of their fingers. And I think that's a really powerful idea to get their imaginations engaged in the classroom also. I was speaking with another teacher, and sometimes I think teachers forget our music students don't come into our classroom motivated to play music. They thought they were motivated to play music, but it's still our job to motivate them every single day. So it's just, these are, motivational strategies that increase student engagement. Absolutely.
And I want to, take a moment and talk about kind of the minutia of what these first 6 weeks have looked like for both your beginner classes and your returning classes. So what's the content? What's going on in those first weeks, say, for your beginner class?
There's lots of different activities that I think end up working out pretty well. So first classes, they're always playing music. They're always playing ensemble music or 2 or 3 part music. But aside from that, I've worked out some procedures that seem to work well for me to do more detailed position checks. So I'll do like kind of a musical chairs thing, like I'll play music in the classroom. When the music's on, they're in a playing position, and when the music's off, they're in a rest position. Because we forget that young guitar players, they can't sit up straight for long periods of time either. And we need to kind of temper our expectations of how long they can actually maintain a good position, giving them time to rest in between, sessions of playing.
When we think about any learning objective for a student, that's true. So, that's a physical thing, and a student will let you know when they're not able to do that anymore. But think about other things like issues of attention span or ability to self-regulate their learning for long periods of time. You're going to assume you're at square one with everyone. And so for the position thing, that might be like, I'm not going to ask them to sit in good position for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time without getting to standby and relaxing in those first moments. And I'm not going to assume that they can attend to a musical task for 30 minutes without a break. So we're going to say, okay, we're always going to have like these little moments of rest and deviation from that typical rehearsal each 2 or 3 minutes. And then over time, you start to make those longer and longer. So by the time you do get to week 6 or spring semester or second year, you've thoughtfully gotten the students to a place where they can attend to you for very long periods of time. They can practice on their own and self-regulate.
Right, yeah. And sometimes, when you're pushing your students too hard and not aware of their limitations as young musicians, if they're compliant and they want to do what you're asking them to do, they will still attempt to do that even though they're not really able to give you the quality that you're asking for at that moment. So that's when you run into like a lot of slouching positions, a lot of not sitting up straight,
and that's interesting because that can be misinterpreted as disrespectful or a loss of engagement.
Absolutely.
Or when in reality they're physically uncomfortable and probably feeling a little bit like worried that they're going to do the wrong thing, and that those sorts of feelings manifest in different ways for each individual. So it can look like a poorly managed class when in actuality they just can't sit like that for 27 minutes without a break.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, it's really important to understand what potential rewarding moments are for a class and make sure you're getting to them very frequently and regularly. I make this mistake all the time. I set up a lesson where the reward is really at the end of the 90 minutes. It's where all three parts come together, and then
they call it burying the lead, right? Wait until that last moment where you get that, really aha, like, oh, look what we did. But it's 90 minutes after you walked in the door, so nobody cares anymore.
Right. So just making sure that as you're going through your lessons and as you're going through this music, you're finding ways to celebrate success along the way, and for them to have those moments where they feel like they've accomplished something, every 5 minutes or so. Really,
Absolutely.
like especially for the ones with shorter attention spans.
And do you, so when you talk about celebration, I'm sure that takes a lot of forms. Can you talk about how you, I guess, develop a relationship with an individual student through your rehearsal? So there are moments of success and you're celebrating, I'm sure you tell the group. Are there opportunities for your individual students, even at the beginner stages, to sort of get that positive feedback?
Yeah, and this is, I think, the skill for me that took the longest time to develop. I tried lots of workarounds to kind of avoid like really getting one-on-one with individuals and working with them until they find that moment of success. And Jeremy worked with me for years on this and still does. But just, when you ask a student to play and perform for the class, give them a clear goal and have them keep working towards that goal until they find that moment of success. And it's really important for the students. If you leave that student earlier than they find that success, you've given them critical feedback that they haven't succeeded with.
Oh, it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
It's
and
defeating.
It's a skill as a teacher that I think takes the longest, it took me the longest to develop. Just really understanding what can they accomplish within this 30 seconds, because you can't spend 5 minutes with the student, the rest of the class will check out.
Lose
so
everybody.
It's a short period of time. What am I looking for? Right. Is it a better eye finger sound? Yeah. Then maybe they don't play the whole passage. Maybe they just play one note, and you say, that's the sound I'm looking for. Great.
And, it's, ironic's not the right word, but the most important time for considering those little moments of success and ensuring that they happen, the most important time are those first moments of a student's participation in the class. So we as teachers often kind of hesitate to set up that culture in those beginning moments because we're afraid of calling out a student and it being a negative experience. So by the time you get to the spring semester and you're like, okay, I'm going to start calling out all individuals. Granted, you can do it then. It's never too late. But then it is a shock that you have to sort of build around and accommodate for. So, I've seen a lot of programs this early fall. We've got about a little over 50 programs going strong. Some are just single classes. Some programs have 200 kids in them. Some are guitarists, some are band directors, some are first-year teachers and not guitarists. And what I'm seeing is really like it's all over the board in relation to student engagement and what they're able to do. But I see some programs moving super quick and just hitting the ground running, and everybody's right there. And then others that are really dragging a lot of weight, struggling to make progress in these first few weeks, and that sets a precedent for the student, how they see this class is going to go for the year, and then oftentimes that pace really kind of stays the same throughout the year, which is the impetus for this webinar. It's like the things we're doing right now can hold us back or push us forward. So when we think about having momentum and setting a stage for momentum, do you have any thoughts about how to do that with your own program?
Yeah, so I'd like to maybe talk about the more advanced classes.
Sure.
So the beginner classes we kind of discussed early. I was really careful this year about choosing repertoire for my intermediate and advanced classes that they could accomplish something on the first day of class. Because ultimately, the momentum you're talking about is a momentum of small accomplishments strung together to form, you know, a larger musical piece or performance or whatever it is. So, yeah, I was super aware of my repertoire selections. My non-varsity class, the intermediate class, started a piece by Mark Moore. It's new to the curriculum, the Taking Turns.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's one simple eighth note motive that kind of moves around. And I was able to get into really like dense musical ideas of sound color and dolce and ponticello right out of the gate, because you know the motive was so easy and so like kind of well packaged that that they felt good from the first day. Made sure their guitars were nice in tune, you know, and then just jumped right into the music.
How did you know that that would be a good piece at that moment?
I just there weren't many musical challenges. The rhythms were like straightforward. There was either quarter notes or simple eighth note, quarter note, mixed motives.
And you're certain everybody in that class can do that?
Yeah, you know, I benefited from teaching all of them last year, and you know, knowing that they could beat count through this on day one, and it was only 3 notes per section basically, and yeah, and some of them probably looked at that music and said, "This is too easy for us. This is too easy for me." But then by kind of explaining the details and the richness of how we were going to approach this piece, everybody bought in.
Yeah.
And ultimately bought in because the classroom sounded nice on day one, which is really important. So, and now we're into much harder musical stuff, and they've kept that kind of detailed approach that every single measure we're really going to like look at all of the aspects of it. So we're working on chorale, the Hensley chorale now.
That's kind of a tough one.
Yeah, and there's so much going on. Sound changes, accents, chromatic movements, and really, like, we can just, as a class now, we can just work on 2 measures at a time, and they can zero in on all the details. Yeah. But starting that way at first day of school was very important, especially like that class for me has a bunch of big personalities in it. And if there's downtime, if there's time where people are confused and they start acting out a little bit, or so just, you know, kind of using that as a way to just get everybody on the same page on day one was super important for me for that class.
Yeah. As far as your goals for that advanced ensemble, did you, like, prior to going into that first class, you knew who was in the class and you had known them before. Did you go ahead and choose pieces that you knew you were going to be able to program throughout the semester, or is it more on a kind of week by week basis and you're feeling it out and that pacing is really adjusted throughout the course of the semester?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. They had to have something in their binders on day one. Yeah. So that was definitely the one that I chose. And kind of to reinforce the point that you made earlier, I don't overplan. You know, so often the class will dictate what your next move is, whether it's a repertoire selection or whether it's your next rehearsal kind of focus. So yeah, they had their first piece in their binder, which was for that class, that non-varsity class was Taking Turns, and then I just kind of watched and saw how they reacted to that piece for the first couple of classes, and that kind of informed my next decisions on what I thought was appropriate, what they could handle.
Yeah.
Throwing a goal too far away from what they can accomplish, it's it's tempting. It's so tempting. And I've done it before, and I've succeeded sometimes, and I've done it before, and I've failed sometimes. And it's just a leap of faith. But if you're able to methodically kind of move them along through repertoire selections that are appropriate for them to find success in immediately, it's so much better for the classroom environment, and so much better for
the big piece to the equation is if you start from a baseline that you know they can accomplish, then everything else is positive from that point. I have been parts of programs that I guess the teacher wants to make a statement and they put something very, very difficult in front of them right on that first day. And like you said, it can go both ways. That could be like, wow, this is super hard, but I'm motivated. Like, we're going to be playing some really exciting music. From a musical development and technical development standpoint, that's not a good idea.
Right.
But I'm wondering, what are your, if you don't have really hard defined specific rep goals for your advanced ensemble moving through the year, what are your broader goals for them as musicians and people and for the program, if you have any right now? Or that may be something that's dictated moment to moment too.
Yeah, it is. So for me, I think about the long-term health of the musicians in my classroom, the long-term musical relationships that should be formed and nurtured. Like, I love my students to continue on with this into high school, into college. It's such a fulfilling thing for a teacher to have students that succeed at the next level. And to really do that successfully, you have to set them right technically. So my biggest goals are to make sure that I'm not creating any limitations for their future success in music. And that means, being detailed about the way that they're playing the guitar, to be detailed about, right hand and left hand techniques, but still doing that in a way where they're finding, musical richness and value and expressiveness along the way. Because I think, I probably made these mistakes early on, is I was just worrying about the concert.
Sure.
I was just worrying about how the music was going to sound at concert and making sure that it was going to come together. And I had students that, they'd go into high school and they just didn't have the tools to do it at the next level.
Yeah.
Because I didn't pay enough attention to their kind of technical development. So with my advanced students, I'm more and more aware of that. And that becomes very challenging as a teacher to balance those needs with what is ultimately going to motivate them, which isn't the movement of their eye finger,
right,
or a scale.
But it can demotivate them if they get to a point where they can't do that, and
right.
The piece they want to play requires dexterity and comfort and relaxation, and they're not able to do it. Then it becomes
right.
a big problem. Right?
So yeah, you're just kind of navigating that balance is kind of where my focus has been in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And it is nice to see guitar players succeed at the next level.
Absolutely. So your students are going into high school now, and I imagine they have a sound setup. They're able to join advanced high school groups as freshmen, and so your goals are really to have an optimal level of technical sound facility and musical motivation and expression.
Yeah, and just generally, like you said, just a very relaxed technical approach, which takes a lot of stubbornness, I think, on the teacher's part, just to make sure and to watch for potential tension points
and that's advanced stuff, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of our teachers across the country, across the world, some are really accomplished guitarists, others are really accomplished violinists or horn players or what have you, and so to go into your classroom understanding that's a learning process and learning how to identify those tension points. You're in your 10th year?
It's ninth year.
Ninth year of teaching in general?
Yeah.
So I would say, even myself as a as a guitarist, writing, the pieces in the curriculum and the technique that I'm using, it still took me 5 or 6 years of teaching in the classroom to really start to notice that just
Yeah.
immediately, and notice when a shoulder is cocked up, or when a wrist is just a little bit bent, or when a stroke is labored and it's not relaxed, and I think it takes patience to allow yourself that time. But it's got to be intentional for our teachers who are not guitarists, and to be curious about the physical nature of how we play the guitar. Very cool. So broad goals for your advanced groups. Here's an interesting thing that it's come up with some of the programs that I've seen this fall, and I think it's an interesting point that we can touch on for just a moment. But for teachers that are coming in to a pre-existing program, being the first-year teachers. So over the summer, I talked to a lot of people who are going into new programs, and maybe they're first-year teachers, maybe they're first-year guitar teachers, but they've got new jobs. And they're walking into a program where these students have had a guitar teacher in years past. And I've noticed some challenges with that, both from the student perspective and also the teaching perspective. And I wonder if we can't talk just a moment about that challenge and maybe some solutions.
Yeah, I can't speak to it from personal experience. The program that I have at Betachek, I started it kind of the classical program from the very beginning. But I'm the fine arts department chair on our campus, and we've had a lot of turnover in our fine arts programs probably in the last 2 or 3 years. So I watch teachers kind of go through that on our campus, and it is a huge challenge. But ultimately, all of the students in all of our classrooms are really looking for the same things. And establishing that through, probably some cloudy feelings and cloudy emotions still can be done. But students want to be recognized. They want to be cared for. They want to be challenged. And I think there's a hesitation on teachers' parts because they feel like they're walking into somebody else's space because the students were there before them.
You can overly respect that.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead of just kind of establishing really good teaching, really good teaching practices, and paying attention and listening and allowing student voices in an appropriate way.
Right.
And I think the teachers that I've seen that have taken over programs that have been the most successful are teachers that are not afraid to walk into a situation and do their best to take control of it, and also to allow the students to kind of have voices during that process and to kind of go through some of those feelings that the students are feeling. They're ultimately feeling abandoned, possibly.
To join them in acknowledging that's happened. I certainly work with a lot of teachers in Title I schools and spaces where there's a lot of turnover in general in the adults in these students' lives. So there's kind of a deeper issue there when these students lose a teacher and someone new comes into their life. Consistency is really the absolute best thing in my opinion, and that's consistency.
Right.
Showing up is certainly the biggest one, but then consistency in your message, consistency in your rules and management procedures, and so that you become kind of a rock, like a point of support, something that they can count on to be the same way for the most part every day. And I think that's certainly been helpful.
And little gestures make big impacts. Like if you're on a campus, open your room up early in the morning for kids to come in and practice, or to just hang out and relax. And I do that. I've done that every morning since I've been at Betachek, and there's always 5 or 6 kids in my room every single morning before the bell rings, practicing, forming that kind of community, and then those kids are ultimately going to be your allies and your advocates to the other students in the classroom. And just little gestures make big impacts with students.
And that's a culture statement. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So to get back sort of to the nitty gritty of what and how you're teaching for your beginning students, it's really starting at the most basic point, coming from a place of asking them to contribute their musical ideas and their thoughts about each piece as you move forward, slowly really setting up a solid technical foundation, and asking them to be individual people with thoughts and ideas in that space. And then with your advanced class, it's more of a continuation, but again, starting from scratch in a place where you know that they can accomplish technically what's in front of them, and you can immediately start talking about those larger musical concepts. And you're thinking about responsible technical development, and setting up a culture where they're free to approach you and to establishing leadership within your program. And really the pieces and the content are a day by day, week by week kind of thing that comes naturally.
Yeah, and I think just the flexibility of content is so much. It's just easier now with technology. I used to copy everything that I thought they were going to have to sight read for the whole year and put it in their binders. But now I have doc cams, I have TVs that they can all see on.
And really, so it's funny, I want to talk about that behavior because it's something I think a lot of teachers do because they think it's saving them that brain space.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to have to think about printing these out at all over the course of the year. Or I got that done, I can check it off, and it's not going to be something that stresses me out. But what that does is really paints us into a corner and means that there's a lack of flexibility in what we have to offer. I print out very little aside from right when I need it, which is one of the good things about guitarcurriculum.com and the resources. You can really find these things and print them out and have them very quickly.
Yeah.
Even if you've started class and you realize something's wrong, I need something else, you can find it pretty quickly. But for a while I thought, am I just not organized? Am I not a good planner? Because I see all these other teachers who have like everything out for the entire semester, year, just beautifully organized in file cabinets and all of these things. And I just realized that was not a useful way for me to teach.
Yeah.
That it's a little bit more of a organic scenario where I'm really analyzing at every moment and choosing the best course. But the goals that I have for my students, especially in these first moments, are goals that can permeate throughout the entire year. And you gave us yours, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. These are overall musicianship, engagement, being good people goals that I have for students.
Yeah, and I've gone through that same thought process of like, am I a mess? Like, I don't have next week planned, I don't have the week after that planned. But it really does lend itself to listening and adjusting and adapting to your students' needs. And yeah, I don't think I could do it any other way. But it's also a statement probably about our individual personalities and our approaches. And there's no one approach that works
Absolutely
in teaching.
not.
So I see that the teachers that are hyper organized, it seems to work for them, and that's kind of how they need to approach that.
I might just be jealous.
Yeah, true.
Part of it, but there's some cases, and I think especially when you get to high-level high school ensembles where you're going to have to play the Vivaldi concerto, guitar arrangement with the soloist in April, and so you do have these like technical benchmarks that have to happen by a certain point. And those happen in middle school programs as well. But it's all part of that analysis, week to week as to what you put on their plate.
Yeah, and I think, you set, in the classroom, in a class period, you set, short-term goals. You set minute-by-minute goals for, like we were talking about, for student success in that specific moment. I am a big, big fan of the fall concert for both of my programs, mariachi and guitar.
Tell me what that looks like at Bedichek.
So the fall concert, it's usually like end of October-ish. I think my concert is October 24th this year.
So a lot of people say fall concert, but they mean winter concert. Like they say fall, fall recital, but it's actually at the end of the fall semester.
No,
so
I
you
do,
mean,
yeah.
You've been in school 12 weeks and we're having a concert.
Yeah. And it's important for the kids to realize that, they're becoming performers. And how you set up that moment and how they succeed in that moment, because they always do, well, most of the time, is so important for their development. And it's also important for you as a teacher to have some kind of deadline and some kind of timeline that you're trying to work under and work with. And I think it helps and it challenges a teacher to focus their message and to really think about the things that we were talking about, which are appropriate level, music. If you can't get it done in 12 weeks, then it's probably too hard.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and I would encourage all teachers to look at that practice, because it really kickstarts the year. It really gets you focused right off the bat, and gives your students an immediate goal for musical refinement.
What about so you've got this fall concert? One of the things that we know about assessment is that you should have small approximations at all points of what your larger assessments look like. And a concert, is an assessment in a sense. It's more than that. But for example, if you're in a chemistry class in high school and you've got 2 exams and those are your only grades within the entire, your only large grades within the entire semester, those become so painfully important and weighted that the pressure and also the preparation of what it's like to take that test don't exist earlier in the semester. So the likelihood that it's going to be unsuccessful much higher. In music, we have the opportunity to look at that larger concert, give our students small little opportunities like that. Maybe it's playing one piece for a PTA breakfast or something like that. Have you set up any of those leading into that?
Leading into the first concert of the year? No, not really. I think that's usually just kind of the first goal for that. But my students do have a lot of experience kind of performing for the class or playing excerpts for the class leading up to the concerts and stuff like that. But it's something that I'd be open to in the future, to find those little other kind of test performances and things like that.
Or even inviting the principal in for 3 minutes. We want to. These kids just started playing 5 weeks ago. Can you just come in and listen for a moment? And that can be a really nice approximation. You're not moving them and taking them somewhere else, but there's a higher level of pressure, but also a higher level of payoff, and it's a pretty benign experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of double back on your point about the chemistry test, I think music teachers sometimes put a lot of grading weight in the concert experience, and that can be good for accountability and to make sure that students are showing up for concerts but I think it's a little bit misplaced as far as what you're asking a student to be in a music classroom. There's so many other variables that are involved, especially in middle school, with the transportation and just after school availability.
And there are issues of equity and social justice
absolutely,
in this grading process. So and it's something that I did my first years. I was 75% of your grade is that concert. And then I was having to have so many conversations with students who had to work evenings or whose family had no way of getting them there, or even with as much planning and openness and honesty, we still couldn't get them to that one concert. And it just started to feel unfair.
Yeah.
And so I stopped doing that later. But it's not to say they shouldn't be there, and they should be motivated to be there. But when you put all of your grading weight in that one moment, that's exactly what we're doing. We're saying this one moment is 3 times as important as anything else you're going to do the rest of the semester. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah, and it seems heavy too. Like a concert is a celebration of musical achievement. And when you say, if you don't show up, you're going to fail my class, it feels heavy.
Yeah.
And then that concert becomes something different and not what it was supposed to be in the first place. And it's a difficult balance, though, to hold students accountable for that really important moment, and to be sensitive to the needs of a very diverse population that we have in Austin and elsewhere around the country.
Absolutely. But it's so funny because, I mean, it's music, it's performing something that you've worked for a long time to perfect. And I mean, what kid doesn't want to go experience that? And assuming that that isn't the motivation, that I'm gonna change my entire philosophy around what music making is, because there's probably gonna be 2 kids who just either don't want to show up or can't show up to the concert, then that and it, like it says, changes the entire color of your interactions with them.
And in my experience, as running concerts at a school that does have a lot of these challenges, students don't show up for 2 reasons. They're not confident in the material, which is ultimately a teacher responsibility. Or they legitimately couldn't get there that night because of some of the reasons that you stated earlier.
Right.
So it's really important to monitor your students on a daily basis and understand how confident they are in the material and what you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
Because come concert night, if they don't know how to play their part, they might not show up to the concert.
Yeah. And also knowing what's going on with them on a personal level, to the extent that if mom has an overnight nursing shift or something like that, to where that kid doesn't feel like they're failing everyone, and that's not the message you're sending to that kid. I want to change gears a little bit. We've sort of zoomed out into a lot of sort of broader philosophy stuff, but I love that because that's what guides the small decisions that we're making at every moment. But I want to talk a little bit about something that we're going to be offering. Phil and I specifically are going to be offering to teachers, anyone at guitarcurriculum.com, and that is video consultation. And the video consultation, that service can take a lot of different forms, but basically what it is you take a short video, 5 minutes or less, of your rehearsal, ideally where we can see both the students and the teacher behaviors. And then you watch that video, really develop some ideas about what you think is going on. Maybe there's specific challenges that are going on. They could be behavior management challenges, they could be technical challenges, musical challenges, anything. It also could be like, wow, I'm really proud of this moment with my students, and I want to send that for someone else to see. And we get that video, and Phil and I get together, and we kind of talk about things like rehearsal technique and the setup of the room. Is the repertoire appropriate? And we start to troubleshoot these moments or celebrate these moments with you. And over the long term, hopefully help you improve your teaching skills or just get better student performance outcomes in general. And so if you're interested in that, you can certainly contact Eric at austinclassicalguitar.org. And it can be a very short thing. Send us a video, a little bit of feedback, a phone call, a Skype, something like that. And we would just love to see what's going on in your classroom. There are some specific things we could help with. One thing I love to do is kind of a master class. So that can be Skyped directly into the classroom or sent as a video of a performance, because I get to see these kids just having a blast and say, you know, what beautiful tone, like give all this you know, great positive feedback, but also some things that can help that group get to the next level. So we're opening it up really to anyone who wants to interact with us in that way. It's also, I think, a great way to start building community across guitar communities in the United States. So I don't get that many opportunities, and we don't get that many opportunities to see programs and how they function day to day in Washington State, California, Oklahoma, Virginia, New York, and I can only imagine that our field grows and refines and gets better the more we see. And we have you know, a place to share those sorts of things on guitarcurriculum.com. The page, there's a forum, and so that's another way to do it. But especially if there's a specific thing that you'd like to work on or celebrate, we would love to see these videos. So what would happen is you'd reach out to Eric, and then Phil and I would set up a Google Drive folder with your name on it and share it with you, give you a place to submit the video, and we'd set up a phone call or a video conference to watch it together and have some fun. So going back kind of to these first 6 weeks and putting everything into perspective, are you actually incorporating things that are not guitar curriculum into this first fall semester?
Yeah, I think more and more I am. And that's partially for my own ear. Just I like to hear just different stuff in the classroom, stuff I haven't heard before. It helps me stay, you know.
And you arrange and write things.
Yeah. So that's part of me kind of, you know, arranging and writing stuff that I think would be interesting to do in a guitar ensemble. That kind of gives me a little bit of creative satisfaction.
We'd love to put those up on the site.
Okay, great. And sometimes it's about like relevancy for the students too, like, you know, hearing an idea that the students are working on or listening to or something like that, and finding a way to incorporate that. You know, I've done arrangements that were totally student based,
right?
And ideas that came from students, and I think I'm going to do one, you know, in the next couple of weeks. Some video game music that the students are just loving, and that they're already figuring out how to play on guitar, and it just screams, you know, for an ensemble arrangement.
Well, that was actually my next question. So you know, we talk about elevating student voice, and like when you know, like what I do often early on and in the beginning of the semester is we'll do really simple composition around ideas that the students are coming up with on their own, just as they're noodling on the guitar, and things that they know sound good. They don't know how to read what they're doing, but we might structure something. The other thing is honoring those preferences that they have in pop music or songs that they're listening to, and kind of creating that understanding that what you're listening to out there is not different from what we're doing in here. Certainly video game music, pop music, all kinds of things. I use recording equipment like GarageBand and things like that in my classes, even though it's at the beginning stages. I love to switch it up from time to time, just so they know that every single day is not a 90-minute rehearsal of guitarcurriculum.com trios.
Yeah, and it's important because structure is so important in the classroom, right? Consistency, but novelty is that other element that students need. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're you know, grinding out the same music over and over and over and over again for 6 to 8 weeks, your classroom is going to become stale. And yeah, you absolutely need to look for other outside influences.
And right now is when that happens, at least in my experience. So you do, you've done your couple of rote pieces in the beginning, you're into like meditation or level 1 beginning, reading stuff, and then you're 6 weeks in, and there's just this moment where every kid in that class realizes, this is it. This is what I'm doing every day. And it might be, musically compelling and gratifying, but it's the same every day. And so after, coming to that realization, I realized we can switch it up. We can do different things. I think in my earlier years of teaching, I was worried about losing them and losing our ability to rehearse functionally. And like if I change it up, if we start writing music or kind of splitting up into groups or whatever I want to do, we're gonna lose this momentum that we have. It's actually the opposite in my experience.
Yeah, an engaged student, one that's truly engaged in what they're doing, can accomplish so much in a short period of time. And a student that's not, maybe a student that's compliant but not engaged, it can take that same student a very long period of time to achieve the same results. So,
and that it really answers that question about these programs that are dragging weight and losing momentum, and like a stone rolling to a stop. And then there are those programs that are just off to the races. That engagement piece, they've got to know that there's different things coming at them, and that really they're going to be able to do so many different things in this program. And that's where a lot of stuff for me outside of the curriculum comes in, and it can be also stuff that's in the curriculum just presented in different ways or whatever. But another opportunity to highlight that student voice and validate their opinion about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just other materials that I've been kind of pulling in. There's lots of great 4 guitar arrangements out there. Forget the French site that I've been kind of buying some music from.
Productions.
Yeah. Some cool stuff. There's some really well arranged Bach chorales out there for 3, 4, 5 parts that are kind of interesting as sight reading, which is rich sight reading material, and just pulling in different kinds of stuff and trying to give context to the stuff that I am pulling in, historical context but yeah, I've been doing that more and more.
Another thing that I do like to do, and I've conveniently left this to the last 2 minutes of this webinar, but I do get lots of students that come in with pre-existing conditions, with experiences with with pop music. They can play first position chords, they can do different things. I try and find unique ways to bring those skills into the larger group. So when I do, say, an arrangement of chord and melody of a pop song that they know, I can rely on that student that had this skill coming in, and they may have been a little bit upset about that. They had this advantage they thought coming in. They played before, but I haven't asked them to do that thing yet, and it provides an opportunity, for that student to showcase what they know that might not be part of the exact sequencing that I've planned out for them, and really coming from a strength-based approach. A kid that comes in knowing how to play Metallica, it's not a deficit, it's not a problem until you make it that, and allowing these moments to showcase those as strengths and honor that work that kid has put in prior, really very helpful.
Yeah, there's so many, that's why the guitar is becoming so popular now. There's so many ways to experience it in our culture, and there's so many transferable skills in whatever style that they've learned or are coming to you with. And it's a smart way to do that. I work with a lot of guitar players in mariachi also, so my guitar players, they play multiple styles of music, within my classroom. So there's appropriate ways to treat the classical guitar, but there's no right or wrong way for the guitar to be utilized, in appropriate musical contexts.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we're running up against it here. I want to thank Phil for coming in. Things are very busy for Phil right now. He took the time to come in and tell us how things are going. And you, honestly, the way that these webinars work, we could talk for hours about any one of these things. And the more our broader community, those of you that are watching out there, can contribute and send in some questions that are really pointed and directed, I think that would be super helpful for us. But ultimately, this is just a hope to bring us closer, to meet new people, to understand what's going on out there, and for you to understand what we're up to. I want to give a big thank you to Eric Pearson for putting this together. As always, if you need anything, you can get in touch, actually, with all three of us, Eric, Phil, or Travis, at austinclassicalguitar.org, and we're hoping to hear from you. Thanks.